Chapter 6 is on sensation versus and perception. First, you need to know some definitions of sensation versus perception. So sensation essentially is any energy, any stimuli coming into your system from the environment, okay? Perception is how you interpret that stimulation coming in. So how you interpret the sensation. You can't have a perception without a sensation. So the sensation is some version of stimuli coming in, perception, your interpretation of that stimuli. So we can look at it through the brain. The brain just receives the information through sensation, but the perception is making sense out of that sensation. So making sense of the world, we do it one of two main ways, bottom up or top down. Bottom up processing essentially is what am I seeing? You take the information, you assemble it, you put it together, you try to figure it out. Top down processing is because of everything you've interacted with, because of all the information that you have, you automatically start to think that that's something you've seen before and you put it in the same box with that thing. We work harder at bottom-up processing, where we have to wonder, is it or isn't it? What is that thing? Okay? Top-down is instantaneous. We can't stop it from happening. Now, in the videos that are also in this module, I want you to watch the videos on vision. There's one in particular on the mask. For the mask, you will see that it discusses top-down processing, and you can't unsee, you can't stop it from happening. Okay? Now, when we look at that sensation coming in, all but one of our senses has to go through 3 steps. The olfactory, or the sense of smell, does not have to go through the 3-step process. It goes directly to the brain. Otherwise, every sensation has to go through what's called reception, which is bringing that stimulation in. Transduction, which means to put it into neural processing so the brain can understand it. And then transmitting it to the brain for it to be processed. Anytime you have more stages, anytime you have more steps, there's more things that can go wrong. So one of the most dependable senses we have is actually our olfactory sense, or a sense of smell. The rest of them, because they go through these 3 steps, have some very major problems that we'll see through some of the videos that are coming up. Terms you need to know. Thresholds. First, we have the absolute threshold. It is the absolute minimum that stimulation has to be in order for you to not only detect it, but be able to understand it. So it's got to have an absolute threshold, minimum level. Okay? Then we have subliminal. Now, subliminal means that it did not meet the absolute threshold or the minimum level of intensity for you to detect it. So it comes in the version of, I always say, the heebie-jeebies. So you'll get a feeling about something. So maybe you walk out of Meijer and you get a feeling, a bad feeling. You don't know where it came from. You don't understand. You're looking around. It wasn't enough of a threshold to give you a shadow image. It wasn't enough of a threshold so that you could detect or recognize a noise. It came underneath of that absolute threshold. So because your body can't recognize what it was or understand, what your body does is let you know through the heebie-jeebies that there's something there, but it wasn't at the level of detection or understanding. Now, when we look at the absolute threshold, I got the definition there again, and I put it next to difference threshold. The difference threshold is typically called the just noticeable difference. That's where you could detect between 2 stimuli. So we live by the lake. And a lot of people like to go around and pick up rocks or shells or whatever from the lake. So if you have a whole handful of rocks and one of them falls out and you didn't notice it, and there also wasn't any sound or anything with it, you didn't notice it because it didn't make the difference threshold. There wasn't enough mass, weight to it for you to understand that you lost it somewhere. If you did understand and you could tell that it weighed less, you could tell that it felt less, then it met that difference threshold. Now that happens for each and every one of our senses so that we have a just noticeable difference between the two. So typically in class, I would send around two little weights from a little weight set, and I'd ask you to close your eyes and put one of the weights in your hand and notice that it's there. Then put the other weight in your hand with your eyes closed. You could notice it's there. Then have somebody put the heavier weight in your hand and the lighter weight in your hand, and you would not be able to notice it was put there unless they clicked it or unless they did something else for you to recognize, because there wasn't a noticeable enough difference in weight for you to understand. Sensory adaptation is something that happens to all of our senses. It can happen throughout the day and definitely happens throughout our lifespan. So, for example, throughout our lifespan, when you are young and you get some hot soup, they have to put ice in it and cool it down because it's too hot for your senses. As you progress through age, there's less ice cubes or there's just blowing on it, and that heat isn't as bad and sometimes even begin to enjoy the heat. As you progress older, then you're going to find if you work in a restaurant that has older people come in, they'll not only have hot soup where you could see the steam off of it and it's even bubbling in the bowl, they need it hotter than that. They'll even ask you to microwave it some more because there's not enough. It could be in taste as well. So when it comes to older individuals, they love to use hot sauce. They love to use all sorts of heavier spices because those spices are what they need in order for them to taste anything that's there. On a shorter term basis, I like music. I listen to music all the time. It's what reduces my stress. I'm a right brain person. So as soon as you get into my car, here's what's going to happen. Typically, I'll turn the radio down before I turn the key on. And the reason I'll turn it down is because if somebody else is getting in the car, I'll blow them right out of the car. So how did it get that loud? Well, I start with it lower after I turn it down from getting in the car. And then a good song comes on, and then I turn it up. And then another one. As I go, it would take me an hour to get to work. So as I make that drive, by the time I get to work, you could hear me coming long before you could see me coming. So then you get in the car later on, you turn it on, you're like, Jesus, that music's loud. That's sensory adaptation as well. You got used to it, so you needed more of it in a shorter amount of time. Now, the only main reason I use this slide is for the just noticeable difference of vision and size. So I'd have you look at this slide and find that there are two just noticeable differences that I put on here. Now, the first one, sorry, is the little dots in front of difference, Weber's, and any. There's a little purple dot. That little purple dot is the just noticeable difference compared to the purple on the screen for the rest of it. Now 50%, when it comes to the just noticeable difference, 50% of the population has to be able to recognize it. So 50% of you right now can see that dot and 50% of you cannot. It's all right if you cannot, not a big deal. That's actually normal. So let's look at the second one. The second one I have is in size. So if you look where the orange dots are, it says 2% of weight, 8% of light intensity, 0.03% of sound wave frequency to a notice difference in pitch. Those three are a just noticeable size difference in type setting than the rest of the page. So here's an easy way to look at it. Look underneath of the Weber's Law section where it says by a minimum percentage. Look at the word minimum. In the word minimum, I want you to look at the letter N. Then I want you to look below it at the letter N in percent. Can you see a difference in size between the N in minimum and the N in percentage? If you can, then you're 50% of the population that can tell that just noticeable difference. If you cannot, then you're the 50% that cannot. Again, perfectly normal. Some might be able to see both the color difference and the size difference. Some can see one and not the other, and some can't see either one. Again, all varieties of that is perfectly normal. Now we have the absolute thresholds of what 50% of the population can see the faint stimuli. Vision is a candle flame seen from 30 miles away on a clear, dark night. Now, I've had students who ask me, what if there's a house in the way? You can't have anything in the way. Of course, that it's an obstruction. You can't see it. If there was a clear route on a clear night to that candle, 50% of you could see it 30 miles away. Excuse me. Hearing the tick of a watch from 20 feet. 1 teaspoon, that's very tiny, of sugar in 2 gallons of water. That's 2 milk jugs. Smell 1 drop of perfume throughout a 3-bedroom or 3-room apartment. Now, I wish my son really would have known that when he was using that. Oh, I can't even remember the name of that perfume he used to use. And oh my God, was it strong. Just a dabble, do ya? And then we have touch, a bee's wings falling from about a half an inch from your cheek down to your cheek. Okay? Subliminal perception remembers that thing that's just below that absolute threshold. We call it non-conscious perception. Remember when we talked about the low and the high understanding of life consciousness? This would be on the low end. So what works for subliminal perception? It's called the mere exposure effect. The more you're exposed to something, the more you tend to like it. The more you're near someone, the more you tend to interact with them and like them. The more you see something on television, the more you tend to like it. The mere exposure of something will make you like something. So let me give you this example because I know music, like music. I'm not a country fan. Some of the older stuff, yes, not this new stuff. But anyway, not a real big country fan. So if I were working someplace that played country music all day long, you'll find that after a while you start singing along with the songs, you start liking that song, the mere exposure of it. Radio stations know that. Why do they keep playing the same songs over and over and over again? Because they want you to like those songs. They even get paid to play those songs over and over because they know the mere exposure effect will get you to like them more. The mere exposure effect works on commercials. Why do they play the same commercials over and over? Why do we even have commercials? Because just seeing them can make you like them. That's the mere exposure effect. Scents are a really big one with the mere exposure effect and going underneath of that subliminal or underneath of that conscious level to the subliminal level. So there's scents that you like, scents you don't like, scents that you don't have feelings for one way or another, and the control, which is just plain, there's no scent in it whatsoever. We can, for example, pipe in scents that are pleasant, and you could be in a classroom that you've always hated the teacher, hated the class itself, hated everything about it. Pipe in a subliminal so that you do not know it is there, scent that is pleasant. By the time we're done, you'll like the class, like the teacher, like whatever, at least like them better. We could do the opposite in a class that you love and pipe in an odor that you don't like, even though it's below your perception. You're not scrunching up your nose. You're not disliking anything. You don't recognize it's there at all. By the time you're done, we can have you angry, frustrated, not liking the class, not liking the instructor, everything. Odors are hugely important because they go directly to the brain. We also have what's called a perceptual set. Perceptual set is what we expect to see. It's top-down processing like we just talked about. So for example, in some countries, that would be the Loch Ness Monster. Typically around here, we don't think that first. We think it's a tree branch or something more simplistic. It's a perceptual set of what you expect to see. So let's look at that perceptual set. We can also use it with the term priming. So we can prime you to see what we want you to see. So first I want you to look at the picture on the left-hand side. The picture on the left-hand side is a picture of an old woman. So if you look, she has some kind of doohickey thing on her head, but she has bangs. She has a huge nose with a bump on it that comes around down to the nostrils where you can see that line. Her eyes have wrinkles that are strange. They go around in a circle around that pupil instead of out to the sides. If you go down to her mouth underneath of that nostril, you can see her mouth there into a large chin that goes down into a feather boa. Now I want you to look at the one on the right. The one on the right is essentially the same picture, but now it's of a young woman. Instead of the old woman facing more toward you, this woman is facing away. Instead of that hair being her bangs, that is all of her hair from the side view. You can look down the front of her forehead, down into eyelashes that they put there for you sticking out, into a little button nose there sticking out, cheekbone, and into her chin line is now where the nostrils were on the old lady. Now, for the ear, they even put an earring there for you to show the dot with the ear around it. Instead of a chin, this is now a neck with a necklace around it going into a V-neck feather boa. Okay, so now I can prime you to see an old woman and a young woman. So what do you see when you see this? It's ambiguous, which means that I can get you to see both the old woman, so try to find that old woman, and then switch your mind back to finding the young woman. And then you can even switch them back, if not see them both at the same time. So I can prime you that way. Now, if I had just shown you the old woman and then showed you this picture, you'd see the old woman. If I had just shown you the young woman, then you'd see the young woman. Now, what comes into play is that some people have seen this picture before, and so they already see both views because they've already been shown both views. So that's why I do both views. It's just easier that way for you to understand. Now we can have context, meaning what is surrounding it changes our perception. Now hopefully throughout schooling you have learned that those big dots on the left picture around that center dot tends to make the center dot look smaller compared to the dot on the right that has 4 small dots around it, which can make it look larger. Okay. That's a context effect. It is the way we could see things from far away. Depth perception comes into play. All sorts of different types of errors with vision can come into play. Hopefully you've been taught well enough that that dot is the same size no matter what you see. The other thing can be in spelling tests. Why is it that we use spelling tests where we use context clues so that you can understand which word to use? What if we use the word double with pear, P-E-A-R, that's the fruit. It wouldn't help you to understand that I may have wanted pear that goes with double, which is P-A-I-R. Apple typically goes with pear, P-E-A-R, instead of pear that you pay. And payee would go with payer, P-A-Y-O-R, instead. Context clues help you to find in spelling which word is actually the one that we want instead of jumbling them up the way they are here. Emotion plays a big effect on what you see and what you perceive as well. So let's take a look at those. Destinations seem further away when you're tired already. When you're carrying something heavy, it seems further away. When you're carrying things that are heavy, it makes you feel sadder. Sad music makes you feel sad. Happy music can make you feel happier. That's why I like when you break up, there's breakup music because you want to delve into that feeling, and that will help with your emotions. So things that you want seem closer, don't seem as far away, don't seem as difficult. So your emotion plays an effect on each and every perception that you have. Now let's go into vision. Now why are we doing vision first? Because vision actually, though we depend on it the most, it is actually the least responsible, dependable. It is the one that screws things up the most. So let's take a look at vision. So first you need to know the definition of vision, and it's physical energy coming through in light waves to the retina of the eye. So when we look at when we look at visible light, the one that I just had on there, it's very small. Visible light is very small in the spectrum of all other wavelengths that we have out there. And that's the main thing that you need to know. There's very little as far as visible light for us to recognize. Then on this slide, what you're looking at is that the pupil of the eye, and at the end of the eye, there's an optic nerve, which you're going to find is a blind spot for you. Then underneath of that is actually what the rods and cones that are there are actually how the information that comes in through the eye gets interpreted, formed to be transmitted to the brain. So again, more errors can happen there. Here's what your rods and cones actually look like in the eye when they're magnified. And here's that blind spot. When we look at a blind spot, it's not like when you look around you can actually see the blind spot. It's in your peripheral vision. That's your side vision instead of your center vision. So it's in your peripheral vision. And when you look around, your brain will actually fill the spot so that you don't recognize that there's a blind spot there. But there is. So it can also skew how you see things. So let's take a look at the next slide. Typically, I'd have this picture, and what I'd want you to do is just follow the directions here. If you want to print this off, this might help you, or you might be able to do it with your iPad, laptop, whatever. What I want you to do is to close your right eye, stare at the spray can that's on the right with your left eye. Slowly bring the thing to you so that you're in your peripheral vision seeing that spider web. As you see the spider web and you're bringing it to you, you'll find that the spider in the center automatically disappears and is filled in with just spider web. That's your brain, and there's your blind spot right there. So you found it. So it won't fill in with the spider because that's not what the context clues are around it. The context clues are saying to fill it in with the rest of the spider web. So things that you've seen on a regular basis, like things in your house, you know where they are, you know what they are, and it'll fill it in with those context clues, filling in the information. We also have color vision. Remember that color is not something that's embedded in the items that we see. It is what you perceive in our brain. That's why people can be color blind. They personally can't see greens and reds or yellows and blues, or there's a whole spectrum of colors that they can't see. It is perceived by you. How it's perceived is because of the subtraction of wavelengths rather than adding of wavelengths. Now, we're not going to do a lot about that because that's more of a biological aspect. Just understand that it's something that we do that is innate in us, not innate in the object that we're looking at. Now, when we do look at color blindness, I want you to look on the right-hand side. At the top, I have a whole bunch of green bubbles with a number inside of it. At the bottom, the same thing, a whole bunch of red bubbles with a number inside of it. So hopefully you can recognize what those numbers are. The top number is 45. The bottom number is actually 71. Now, some think it's 74. That's all right. Close enough. So we have 45, 71. Now, with these numbers, that is to perceive whether you have color blindness or not. You would be surprised at how many classes I have where a student who's never been told, does not know that they're colorblind, finds out that they are colorblind by just looking at this. Now, how is it that they've been able to pick the red crayon or the green crayon? That's because there's differentiations for them in the versions of gray, and they've been told forever that that's a red one or green one, so they assume that that color gray is actually red or green instead, or yellow or blue or any other variety of colors, depending on their colorblind issues. Now what I want you to do is to stare at the dot in the middle of this flag. We're going to stare at it for 30 seconds. Do not blink. Do not look elsewhere. All right, now what I want you to do is to either look at a white wall or a plain wall, or look at this right here. What is it that you see? What color changes took place? Notice what your brain is doing to the actual picture to what it is now. That is you, not what, all you're looking at is a blank sheet there. So that is something that you do with that color perception. So we're going to do it again. I want you to look at the black dot in this one. We're going to do it for 30 seconds again. Don't blink, don't look away, etc. All right, now what do you see? Again, a change of color, a change of perception on what's going on. You're doing that, and that's the way you interpret colors. Now we're looking at figure ground perception. So figure ground perception is how to be able to pick out objects, things that seem to be standing out from the background behind it. So first, when you look at this picture, some of you will see the goblet, the vase, whatever you want to call it, in the center first. Others will see the two faces first. Whatever you see first is your figure. Whatever you saw second is your ground. Figure, ground, perception. Now, of course, because you know they're both there, you can see both of them. But what was it that you saw first? Then take a look at the stepping. So, again, some of you will see the arrows going up and down first. Others will see what looks like firemen holding on to each other walking down steps first. Figure, ground. Whatever you see first, figure. What you see second, ground. We did a lot of depth perception testing on children because they wondered why it was that when they're first crawling, stairs, steps, crawling off the side of a bed doesn't seem to be something that they recognize could be dangerous to them. But then after they've been crawling a while, all of a sudden they figured out and they wouldn't cross it at all. So they've done visual cliff testing, and what that thing is the plexiglass all the way across the top. So no, they won't actually fall all the way across the top, but it looks as if they would fall if they crawled across. And they tested small children beginning to crawl and found that they'd crawl across it no problem, no thinking at all. And then they found ones that had been crawling for a while that they wouldn't cross it no matter what they gave them at the other end. Even if it was a favorite toy, even if it was something they shouldn't be playing with, something they shouldn't be eating, because you know that's always what children will go for. So no matter what, they wouldn't cross it. So then they wondered, well, which one is it? Is it like a little switch in their brain that as they progress through age, it just wham, starts working? Or is it something that is natural that they learned by falling off the bed, by crawling down the stairs? Which one is it? There are still theorists that believe it is one way and others that believe it's the other way. We still haven't gotten a direct understanding. Most do believe that it's genetic or otherwise that flipped switch, but there's still lots of information that still says that it could be natural based. Size consistency is another thing that can mess with your head. So this room is actually the same. And what they've done is angle the back of it so that it looks like one person is quite larger than the other one when they're actually the same size. The positioning of it changes and alters it. That black and white flooring alters perception quite a bit. Anytime you walk into a room and they have that black and white pattern, know that they're probably messing with your head just a little bit. Okay? So as we progress through the slide, it'll show us the difference as well. Now, when we look at figure-ground relationship, it's called the Gestalt principle. And the Gestalt principle says that there's something that clearly stands out at us, which is the figure, and the stuff that's less distinct is the background, which works in the prey and predator world quite often. So, for example, when you're looking at this, you can see the moth that's in there. In the prey-predator world, that figure doesn't pop out at them as much. That's why they don't see it as much. And so it helps quite a bit. Because we can perceive this, they actually came up with other things that were figure-ground relationship that are more difficult for us to see. This is an example of that more difficult for us to see. In this picture of all those leaves, there are 3 rabbits in there. There's one to the right-hand side, somewhat in the middle from top to bottom, one on the left-hand side, middle from top to bottom, one dead center towards the bottom of the page. One of those bunny rabbits is looking at you with the tail behind it. The other one has the tail towards you and it's looking away. And the one in the dead center is in a seated position with it facing you. Now, is it difficult to see? Absolutely, because the figure-ground relationship for our eyes. Now, these kind of paintings and pictures were quite popular for some time. You'd go into the mall and they'd be all the way down the center aisle so that everyone could stand there and stare at them for hours trying to find the figure-ground relationship and what was hidden in these pictures. Now, people that are nearsighted tend to have more problems seeing these things. People will tell me they have to squint one eye or squint both, close one eye. They'll do all sorts of strange things to try and see them. They are actually there. If you don't see them, it's the figure-ground relationship actually working the way it's supposed to. The next thing is when we look at this, I want you to look at it quick, look away. And the thing is, how many doors are there? Well, if you look at it fully now, you could see a door opening on the right, and then on the left, on the right, and then on the left, and then one in the center. So there's actually 5 doors there. But if you looked at it instantaneously, it would depend on what you saw first, what the figure was in that group. So was the figure the door on the right, or was the figure the door on the left? And then you'd automatically perceive that side faster for the figure, and the rest of it would become background. It's again the figure-ground relationship. You also don't think of doors going on opposite sides the way these doors are. Which sets us up for perceptual illusions. Perceptual illusions take the way our brain interprets things, takes our understanding, takes all the errors that happen, and then really sort of uses them against us because our mind will actively construct what we think we should be seeing. So there's perceptual illusions like this. If I asked you how many right angles there were, people would start counting up all of the angles that are there. Why is that? Because throughout school, if your teacher drew a box, you would automatically be told that that meant that each corner was a right angle on those boxes, and just take that for granted. So now you perceive every box that you see with right angles. So there's actually no right angles, and they're not even close. I don't want you to think that a right angle is 90 degrees. So I don't want you to think it was like 80 degrees or even 100 degrees. These are extremely obtuse or extremely acute, which means very, very much smaller or very, very much larger than a right angle. Now in this picture, I'll bet you see a white triangle in the center. Now the big thing is the white triangle doesn't actually exist. It's created by your mind. You will even see that that white triangle in the center is actually whiter than the white on the outside. So break it down and go to a small area and use your fingers to cover up the black lines, and you'll find the white is exactly the same color white or same level of brightness of white. That figure is created in your mind. Another thing that we use that has been taught to us that creates that figure-ground relationship and can create perceptual illusions has to do with the lines going away from a straight line or the lines coming toward you on a straight line. We typically think of the lines going away, like on picture B, to represent picture A, where the point of that box is coming at you. When we look at D, where the lines are coming toward us, we look at it as that point in the box is furthest away, as in picture C. Okay? Well, which ones are longer? They aren't actually longer, but the lines make them look or make us perceive them differently. That sets us up for this type of perceptual illusion. If you look at this, I want you to look at the water in particular. That's the easiest one. The waterfall is coming down, and then it goes up, as you can see, to come down. Now, we all know water doesn't go up, but you'd have to actually follow it to get it. You just assume things based off those perceptual illusions that are there and the way our brain will naturally organize information. This is another one I had a picture, a copy of, so you can print this out as well. And it is that the sides on these tables are actually the same length. And I'd give you a ruler so that you can measure them and see that they were the exact same length. But they are, even though they look like they're different. It all has to do with the lines going away or line going toward you to make you believe that one is long and skinny and one is short and fat, and they're really not. They're actually the same. The next sense that we're going into is the non-visual sense. Now remember, before you go on to the non-visual sense, that you look through the videos that go with vision that are in your module. The other thing is that during this section on non-visual senses, there will be a link to get to a testing of hearing. The link doesn't work, by the way. I don't know why it doesn't work, because then when I type it in, then it does work. So I'll explain where you need to go to be able to do that when we get there. All right? So first you need to know the definition of hearing. It's an auditory sensation, auditory, and what it is sound waves that come in through the outer ear, go through the middle ear, and then the inner ear. There are three things that you need to know: pitch, frequency, and amplitude. Pitch, frequency, and amplitude. So those are the three main things that we look at for you to understand that auditory sensation that's coming in. So here's what your ear looks like from a side view, so you can get a gist of just how those sound waves come in and where they're going. On the bottom right hand side, that picture with the blue curly Q, inside of the pink, inside that blue, are all little hairs, tiny little hair like follicles. We naturally lose hearing from the moment we hit 18 years of age and throughout the rest of your lifespan. Most of the time you don't notice it because it's higher pitched things, but the main reason is no damage has been done. It's just the process of aging, and those hair follicles can get bent, can get broken off, can have issues with them so that they no longer function. Each and every one of those hair follicles, when they don't work, another sound can be gone. So what we're going to look at is the fact that the more damage you have done through sound waves that are extremely loud, aren't having the safety of that outer ear to protect you from the damaging waves, are going to cause problems with those little hair-like follicles. Here's some of the noises from top to bottom that can cause hearing loss, like rocket launching, a shotgun blast. That's why you're supposed to wear gear to protect your hearing. If you're in a factory job where there's noise just constantly, or landscaping and working on a lawnmower all the time, anything like that, that constant exposure or loud noises can cause damage to your hearing and can cause hearing loss faster than normal. Now, there was a popular time where students, younger students, would have ringtones that their parents couldn't hear. That shows the progression in hearing. You could even do a test on people and tell exactly how old they were based off of what tones they could hear and which ones they couldn't hear. Now, I want you to look online for National Geographic's Brain Games, where they are testing hearing. The video will come up, and you'll watch how they have a room full of people, and then they'll put their hands up if they could hear that pitch, put their hand down if they can't hear that pitch, and they'll progress through the ages. Now, what I want you to do is to listen to the pitches as well. Turn it up as loud as you can. Make sure everything else is quiet so that you can try and hear these pitches, and find out if you are hearing the pitches that you should be hearing at your age. Because the issue is that because we have inner earbuds, we are not using headphones that cover our outer ear. So the outer ear is to protect you from damaging sounds that ruin those little hair-like follicles on the inner ear. Because we're using inner earbuds, we're causing an earlier loss of hearing than we ever have in history. So I want you to test to see if you're right on or if you're not hearing it, that kind of thing. It'll tell you by ages where you're supposed to be at and what you should be hearing. Some can hear better and can hear things past their age span or lower than their age span. Some will have hearing loss that has happened earlier than they should. The big thing is get those inner earbuds out of your ear. Don't just buy headphones that cover the ear. They should go around the ear so that that outer ear can protect you from damaging sounds and you can maintain your hearing for as long as possible. Now, I always get students that'll ask me, can you get your hearing back? And the answer is no. I mean, you can use amplifications like hearing aids and that kind of thing, but it increases every sound. So no, you can't get back what you have lost, but you can protect what you continue to have, and that's what you should do. The next sensation that we have is touch. Now, touch comes in two different versions. There is touch that expresses feelings and emotions, which is just as important as the touch that is for sharing, comfort, support, pain, pressure, cold, warmth, any of those things. So there's two versions of it. Two different types of sensations that come in from touch. So touch is extremely valuable to humans. Now, when we look at touch, we have to look at pain. And so there's a couple of things that biologically can be altered for pain perception. The first one is called the gate control theory. It says that there is a gate that can block pain or allow pain to go through and pass to the brain so that you can recognize it. Stimulation of those nerve endings or nerve fibers, acupuncture, electrical stimulation, massage, any of those things can close that gate so that you don't feel pain or feel as much pain. Another thing that stops pain is endorphins. Why is it that people try to make you laugh when you're in pain? Laughing produces endorphins. Those produced endorphins make you so that you don't feel the pain as much. So endorphins is another good thing. Now, in discussion about that, there is pain that for many, many years they couldn't figure out why it was occurring, and that's called the phantom limb sensation. So the best example is somebody who has lost a limb, lost an arm or a leg, and typically they're not taken off in a slow progressive manner that the person can recognize. It's quick and usually the person's unconscious or can't remember it. But afterwards, even though the arm is gone or the leg is gone, they still feel pain in that arm or leg that is no longer there. So for a while they thought that this was just craziness, that couldn't possibly be. And then they found out that pain is perceived in that brain. So your body is telling your brain that there's still pain there. And you can't see it to try and correct it, to try and massage it, to try and do anything to try and fix that. Migraines, anybody who has migraines who has that aura is a phantom limb sensation. So there's many varieties of it. Now, what they found out for anyone who'd lost a limb, they used mirror therapy, which means they put a mirror to see the leg that was still there. So it would look like you had two legs. You'd massage the leg that was still there, looking in the mirror to see that it was happening to the leg that wasn't there, and all of a sudden the pain would go away. That worked better than any amount of morphine or any other kind of pain medication whatsoever. Now, of course, psychology plays an influence on our pain as well. The more you're distracted from pain, the less pain you feel or recognize is there. So that's why if you're a sports person and you're in a game and you're playing, you may have been hurt, but you won't feel it as much or recognize it till you're done with the game, and afterwards you'll be like, oh my God, I really did hurt myself. That distraction causes you to limit the amount of pain that you'll actually experience. The other thing about pain is the way we remember it. So there's two things that we need to understand. Memory of pain, that we will remember the peak moments of pain and the duration of that pain and put those two together. So the peak moment of when you broke that arm and then the agony of going to the hospital to get it corrected will all be as one. That peak moment, though, remember that when the arm isn't moved, the pain isn't there as much, but yet you'll remember the peak point for the full amount of time. This happens with women as well with birthing. Ask any woman, and they'll tell you they each have their own war story when it comes to giving birth. And each one will even sort of have to compete with each other. Oh, mine was worse than yours. Oh, mine was back pain. And everybody's got their big deal that goes along with it. Why? Because it was excruciating pain. Most children will actually be told how long labor was. I have students all the time that can tell me just how long their mother was in labor. Why is she using that as a guilt trip? Because what she remembers is the peak amount of pain that happened toward the end, and she remembers that for the full amount of time. So she could say, I had 12 hours of labor with you, and I thought I was going to die. You can't be at that peak amount of pain for 12 hours. It will kill you. Trust me, I'm a mother. I've given birth a few times. Each and every one of them, I remember the peak amount of pain for that duration. Yes, I have used it against my children as well. That's my right in life. But I know that it is not true. My memory is not true. Now, I'm going to have mothers that are out there listening to this going, bullshit, that is true. No, it's not. Sorry. The other thing is tapered pain. The more a pain tapers off and gets slower, the more you will not recall that pain at all. So as you progress through life, you're going to be able to remember the things that were causing you peak pain, breaks, birth, anything like that. But the stuff that happened that the pain slowly decreased, you actually won't remember. You remember abruptly ended pain, and you remember it at the peak of pain, and you remember it for the duration of time. But the tapered pain just tends to go away. Now we have cultural influences on pain and the way we look at pain as well. So first of all, we have mirror neurons in our brain. We have mirror neurons for physical pain, and we have mirror neurons for empathy. So for physical pain, if you've ever watched Jackass or Ridiculousness, you'll notice that one of the big things that they use quite often has to do with gentlemen getting hit in the groin area. I want you to look around the room. Whenever that happens, you will see every other gentleman in the room double over in pain as if it happened to them. Those are mirror neurons for physical pain. You can feel somebody else's pain as if it happened to you. You can feel somebody else's pain more and understand it better if it has happened to you. So typically the ones that feel it the most have been the ones that got hit in the groin themselves. Okay? So you have a better understanding of it. Empathy we'll go into more in the social psychology section, but you have empathy mirror neurons as well. There are less of them than there are physical mirror neurons. With that empathy mirror neurons, it's be able to understand other people's emotional pain, not just physical. And then when it comes to pain perception, we also have cultural influences. Cultural influences will be what was the norm on how they dealt with pain in your family. So there's a couple of aspects on it. Genetic-wise, we tend to see those with lighter colored hair. The reds and the light blondes tend to feel pain more than darker toned hair colors and skin tones. But as they progress through life, because they've felt pain so much, that they build up a tolerance to it. So eventually there'd be a dark skin-toned, dark hair-colored individual, light skin-toned, light hair-colored individual have the same thing happen, feeling pain, and the light hair-colored person will be like, this is nothing because I've gone through it a ton of times. But we do understand that they feel it more, have felt it more often, and it's recognized with them more often. Another thing can be with your family, but this is more cultural based, and this has to do with did you, every time you got a boo-boo, get it kissed, get an ice pack, get a Band-Aid? Did you have lots of different Band-Aids, Batman, Cinderella Band-Aids? You put them all over your dolls, and you had them all over you, and they were almost like stickers. Those people will feel pain far more intensely because they were fed into the pain. Okay, so it was overly recognized. Then there are other families, they fall off a bike and they're bleeding out and dying practically, and their parents will be like, get up, you're fine. So those people will experience pain less because they're taught to experience pain less. What we try to get is a somewhat in-between kind of thing. Pain is not just to be delved into and you languish in it, but pain is also needs to be recognized that it does exist and you're an important person. So you got to try to find some kind of happy medium somewhere in there. Now, when we're controlling managing pain, remember that only 65% of any of our anesthesia will work on the population. So we have to look at that other 35% and what do we do with them? How do we control their pain? What if they need surgery and there's nothing to control their pain? Well, they've looked at electrical stimulation, exercise, massage, acupuncture. Excuse me. Relaxation techniques, that's what Lamaze is for when you're pregnant, and distraction. But what they've found is we have to go past that with a lot of things. And so one of the things that they actually found was virtual reality. Hypnosis, of course, works. We already talked about that. But virtual reality as well. So with virtual reality, you believe you're someplace else. You hear it, you see it. It is as if you are someplace else, and that's what your senses are telling you. So even though you might be immersed in a extremely cold bath that is extremely painful, you won't feel it. You'll feel warm. So maybe you're in the Louvre and you're looking at paintings and you can hear the rustle of people around you and people talking about that painting. You will be distracted to the extent that you will not feel the pain of somebody doing a surgery on you. So that works for some. When hypnosis doesn't work, acupuncture also works. We use this a great deal with those that have been burned. Being burned is one of the worst possible things that are out there for pain, and we just don't have a lot to try and help with that pain, counteract that pain. So hypnosis, virtual reality, anything we could possibly use to help out with that is used, quite honestly. Of course, we go through everything by the biopsychosocial approach, and that's the same way when it comes to pain perception. So in the bottom left-hand corner, there's sections for each one that you can read on your own. But what is an example of each one for pain? So we have the gate control theory as one, selective attention, what you're paying attention to compared to what you're not, empathy pain, understanding others. So all of those are examples, one out of each one of those sections. Our next sensation that we're going to go into is taste. Taste, of course, comes from the receptor cells that are on your tongue. They're called taste buds. They help you to survive, quite honestly. There are 5 main areas that of sense of taste. Of sweet, of course, is for energy. It's a life source. Salty or sodium based is a life source as well. Bitter tends to be something that people think of as a poison, and you have to actually grow out of that. So greens, people are always big on kids eating their greens. Give them a Flintstones vitamin or something, because greens to them, they actually think you're trying to poison them, because all of them, asparagus, cauliflower, broccoli, any of those things to them taste like poison. That's why they make that funky voice and they, spit it out. They believe you're trying to poison them. In time, they will outgrow that. The more that you can do, this isn't for you, it's for big people. Kids don't like it. I'm having it, you don't get it. The more they're going to want it, and the more they'll get over it faster. The other thing is to try a little bit. Try a bite this month. And if you don't like it, spit it back out. Next month, try a bite. If you like it, eat it. If you don't, spit it out. As you do that each and every month, all of a sudden they'll take a taste of it and they'll be like, oh, this ain't so bad. That's because their body is finally getting over the poison aspect to it, which you do grow out of. Okay? Unless, of course, your parents forced you to eat something, and then many times that will be sustained through a lifespan. And then, so for example, I was forced to eat peas. I've never eaten a pea as an adult. My kids have never actually had peas throughout their whole lifetime because I never put it in anything. I never ate it again. There was psychological trauma to go along with those peas that I no longer eat. And I bet you could think of something that can go along that line as well. Now, when it comes to sweet and salty, even though they are life sources, they are the things that we crave. when we have cravings. We eat far more than we actually need to take in. So just remember that when those cravings come along. Now, sour is potentially toxic as well, like being poisoned as well. And notice that as you get older, you like it and like it more and more to an extent. When it comes to sour, why can kids eat Sour Patch Kids more than they can eat their asparagus? And that's because Sour Patch Kids also has sugar in it as well. So once they get through it quickly, they can get to that sugar concept, whereas our greens don't have that at their benefit. Now remember that we have taste buds on our tongue. Those taste buds magnified about 100 times look like that in picture A, and then they've drawn you a nice picture in picture B. Now you have thousands of taste buds on your tongue and the 50 taste receptor cells. Those taste buds are being replaced every 10 days. So you know that white gunk that you get on your tongue that's at the back of your tongue? Those are your taste buds and taste cells that are replenishing every 10 days. Yep, you want to get rid of those. Those are disgusting. So get rid of them, brush them out of there. You don't need them. They're dead and gross. In addition to that, when people give you something yucky like cough syrup or something, your parents probably told you, swallow it as fast as possible. Get it to the back of your throat, swallow it as fast as you possibly can, because then you won't taste it as much. There's actually truth in that, because if you look at figure B, you can see where the taste buds are with those little dots and the lines to them, and notice it's not right at the top of that taste bud. It's in the grooves of it. So the more the liquid gets in there and swished around, the more you can taste it. That's why wine tasters, swish it around their mouth to taste it, get the complete taste. They want it in every taste bud kind of thing. So the quicker you can get something that you don't like to the back of your throat and not get it on that tongue as much as possible, the less you'll taste it. Now, when it comes to taste can be messed with as far as your perception, and a lot of that has to do with what we've been taught culturally. So many of you have been told you get what you pay for, and you get what you pay for means the more you pay for it, the better it's supposed to be. So because that's so embedded in our culture, we have actually done lots of research to test it and found that, yep, that statement alone changes a whole lot of our perceptions of sensations. So an example of that would be these wine bottles. Now, wine can range anywhere from a couple of bucks up to hundreds and hundreds of dollars and even more for a bottle of wine. So they took it all the way from, this was prior to boxed wine, by the way, but it would be the equivalent. So let's take boxed wine all the way up to the most expensive bottle and then we had people test them. Well, of course, the bottles that they liked the best were the ones that were in the expensive bottle, and therefore they thought they were getting what they paid for, and so they liked the more expensive ones better. So then what they did was, have them clearing their pallets, go out into another room, wait. They switched all those bottles around. They put the most expensive one in the boxed bottle container, etc. And they switched them all around, brought the people back in, said, all right, test these again and see if you still like the same ones or if you like something different. And they even used new groups. They changed this from every perspective possible, and they found that they still liked the ones in the expensive bottles, even though the expensive bottle now had the $4 boxed wine in it. Because the bottle was expensive, because it was expensive, they felt that they were getting what they paid for, and so their expectation was it's going to taste good, so it did taste good. Smell is our next one. Now, it's called the olfactory sense. Remember, it is the only one. It's called the shortcut sense. It'll go directly to the brain. It doesn't have to stop through those 3 different processes. Now, for the olfactory sense for humans, we have 350 different types of smell receptors, so we can sense about 10,000 different types of odors. Remember, it's a shortcut sense, goes straight to that brain. Pheromones is a big one. This is what you smell like. You put off pheromones, and this is your sense of who you are or the smell of who you are. So I have students that tell me all the time that they do online dating and, they talk to them and they video chat and they do all sorts of stuff. But then when they meet them in person, they don't know what it was. There was just something there. That just something there that makes it not work out is that sense of smell. You are attracted to senses of smell, and their scent didn't work for you. Was a perfectly wonderful person, but it didn't work out because even though you might not have recognized it, wasn't to the extent that you recognized it, their scent was not something that you found irresistible. Now, if you meet them and you still find that you're attracted to them, then their scent is attraction for you. So we do have human pheromones. You can also buy synthetic pheromones to get yours going and more pronounced for other people. All you really have to do is go out and sweat a little bit and then go out, and everyone will be able to smell your pheromones well. Can humans track scents? We don't have the same amount of ability for scent that other animals do, but we do have some scents that we're really keen on and really good at tracking. Now, when they looked between men and women and their sense of smell, they found that women have a better sense of smell than men do overall. And they found that women can track scents better than men can as well. So there were certain scents that women could track better than others. So I'll give you a second to try and think of what scent it might be that a woman could track. All right, the number one scent that women can track is chocolate. Yep, chocolate. So here's an example. They took a string, they dipped it in the scent of chocolate, then they buried it. They let it grow over so that you couldn't find where it was any longer. And then they had women try and track that scent. And as you can tell, the string is in white. And then you can see where she's in pink, gotten off track and come back to it, but she's still tracking that line. So they can track that scent. We also found that they can track that scent at better times during the month. It typically has to do and correlate with their periods as to when they can smell chocolate the best. There are not 5 senses, there are 7 senses that we have. So you're going to need to know all 7 senses. And our 6th sense is kinesis. Kinesis is the understanding of your body relative to itself. Why is it you can walk and talk at the same time, or at least most people can? It's because you're not thinking about where your legs are when they're walking. You're not thinking pick foot up, put foot back down, or anything like that. It can just do it, and your body understands each body part relative to itself. Now, kinesis is known for gracefulness. You have better coordination, then you have better sense of kinesis. If you are not very graceful and you don't have the best sense of coordination, your kinesis is not as good as others. The last one, the 7th sense that we have, is the vestibular sense. And that is your understanding of your body position relative to gravity. So that gives you the ability to flip upside down, to twirl around, and be able to right that balance. So essentially, the vestibular sense is your sense of balance. Okay? It has a great deal to do with the fluid inside your inner ears. If you've ever had an ear infection that was bad enough to offset your vestibular sense, then that meant you got dizzy. People with issues of vertigo, it is dizziness that they have because it's offset that vestibular sense and they can't get it back and the ability to stay upright because of it. So there are 7 senses, including kinesis and the vestibular sense. Now, when we mix our senses together, and some people have this happen to them without their knowledge, it just happens. It's called synesthesia. Now, when you hear a loud noise, excuse me, when you hear a loud noise, a lot of times it'll look like the light got brighter when that loud noise happened. That's us. That's synesthesia. That's what we're doing. The light didn't get any brighter. We interpreted the light brighter because of the sound, synesthesia. Some people will smell something and they automatically have a taste in their mouth. The big one that happens is a taste of tin in their mouth that goes along with it. When people are talking, you can almost feel the puff of air as they're saying words with P's with that puff or consonant letters. So big ones that come with synesthesia that are pretty well known. I want you to look at the numbers I have on the right hand side. We have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 7's in purple. Now it's not necessarily that they see the 7 in purple, but there are people that when they see the number 7, that they automatically feel a salty taste in their mouth. It has happened with so many people that it is widely recognized as one of the big synesias that is out there. The other one is rock music. When people listen to rock music, there are some that can actually see a purple haze over things that they're looking at while they're listening to rock music. So well known that many rock songs have discussion about purple, that purple haze. In fact, there's one that's even named Purple Haze because of this synesthesia and how popular it is with some populations. Embodied cognition is the next thing that you need to know. And of course, embodied cognition is the physical things that can make you feel emotionally different. So for example, you've had a bad day, you're cold, you're angry. You might want to come home for a nice hot cup of tea or cocoa, and the feeling of that mug just makes you feel warm and cozy. People will wrap their hands around that mug to get that feeling of warm and cozy. Anything that you have to do, it says words on a heavy clipboard. Maybe you got to fire somebody you really like them, and on that clipboard on your to-do list says to fire them, and here's the reasons why. And it just makes you feel weighted down because of that weight. So many people that get divorced, they'll say it's like a weight was lifted from my shoulders because actually being in that relationship was weighty. It weighed heavily on them. The worry of the divorce weighed heavily on them. And then when it was lifted, they feel lighter because of it. When you're in a room full of people and you're given the cold shoulder, that's what it was originally called, given the cold shoulder. It will actually make you feel cold. That means people in the room are ignoring you. If they're ignoring you, you feel colder. That's why they called it giving you the cold shoulder. If they're in a room and you don't like the smell or the scent that's in there, it's a foul smell, you'll believe that people are up to foul play. If the room smells nice, you'll believe that everyone in there is nice. So there's embodied cognition where that physical sensation coming in makes you feel emotionally something to go along with it. ESP, I get asked about ESP. There are 3 versions of it: telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition. Telepathy is reading messages from other people's minds. Clairvoyance, seeing future. Precognition, knowing the future. So, I always get asked, are there people that can do it? Is it real? Well, typically if there's somebody that's charging you $50 to read them, it's not real. They're reading you, facial expressions. They're very good at micro expressions. When you go through the police academy for forensic psychology and whatnot, they will teach you those kind of things. There's some people that are just good at it, others are not, and these people are just good at it. And they can actually believe in themselves that they can read other people because they're actually reading these micro expressions that they don't recognize that they know and understand. When it comes to all 3 of them, are there people that can do it? Well, we have seen throughout history that there are actually people that can do them. They're extremely rare. Extremely, extremely, extremely rare. So if you're paying them money for them to do it, probably not, because what we find is those that have been tested and can actually do it, don't actually do it for money. Summarizing the senses, so we've got the what the sense is, the source, the receptors of it to give you an understanding of each one of those things. And then the sensitivity, we have the most sensitive to least sensitive parts of the body. So most sensitive, back of the knee. Just touch somebody at the back of the knee and watch them fall down. That is a sensitive area. Neck region, want to get someone going with that sex stuff? Start with the neck area. It's very sensitive. Bend of the elbow, both on the inside and on the outside. Outside's most recognized because you whack the back of your elbow on a table or something, and they'll say that you hit your funny bone, and they're doing that out of sarcasm. It's not funny at all. Hurts. So least sensitive, the tip of your nose. Notice when you cover everything in the winter and the tip of your nose can be left out. It can get quite cold and quite red and not be a big deal. If it were any other part of your body, it'd be far worse. The sole of your feet, of course, because if they weren't the least sensitive, we wouldn't be able to walk like we do at all. And the ball of your thumb, that is that big fat part on your thumb. Now, many people, when we're teaching CPR, will use the ball of their thumb to try and register somebody else's pulse. And you shouldn't, because you're actually feeling your pulse, not theirs. So that ball of your thumb is least sensitive to the outside information or stimuli coming in, but very sensitive to the internal of your blood or your pulse rate. And that's all of it for this chapter.